There we go. Okay, so quick critical check-in on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being not very, 5 being very. And just the question is, I have a clear understanding of what today's workshop entails. So this is just based on what I just explained. And you can drop that in the chat, 1 through 5. 4s, I see some 4s and some 5s. So it looks like I've made my objectives clear. Fantastic. And then the next part, again, we're very busy. So, and you can be honest about this, I am present and ready for today's workshop on a scale of 1 to 5. See a 3.5, 3s, 5s. Some folks are really ready, exciting. Yes, 5, 5. Well, thank you for being here. And so the first question is, as our icebreaker, I would just want to, and you can do this either by raising your hand with an emoji, or you can just take off the mute and you can answer the question. So the question is why? So we've hosted, we went from 2020, in 2022, we had 23 readings throughout the state. Last year, we had 40 readings throughout the state. So with such a large increase, my question, and this is for folks who either done the reading in the past or folks who are planning to do a reading, what is your why for hosting a Reading Frederick Douglass together? You can put it in the chat or raise your hand. Yes, Karen.
Sure. So I'm president of the board of a historic house museum in Hadley where 6 people were enslaved in the 18th century. And last fall, we held an event there as part of the process of shifting the interpretation of this site in general to away from centering the family who owned the property to centering all the different people who had labored there, including these 6 people, their lives. And doing that together with a Raising Frederick Douglass event was really powerful in terms of telling stories of these people of these lives that are full of despair, I think. And there was something wonderful about being able to end that program with Douglass's speech and both the clarity of the critique, but also the vision of action and moving into the present. And so there was a kind of arc from 17th century enslavement, 18th century enslavement to 19th century anti-slavery work to our present, the work of the present. And we are planning on doing one again, more focused on Independence Day stories in particular this coming July. And are really grateful that you've funded us a second time.
Thank you so much for sharing, Karen. Next, we have Martin.
Thanks. We actually added this to our Juneteenth event last year, primarily trying to get a little bit more focus. Obviously, we want to have celebration and we want to have a party-like atmosphere, but one of the things that our board felt was missing was kind of an educational component and a reflection component. And so we added this reading into our event last year. It went fairly well. Audio, just that's on our part, needed to be improved, but overall feedback was great on it. And actually suggestions were to possibly break it up a little bit, incorporate more people in the community into reading it versus we had a professional actor actually come and do it. He did a great job, but they felt it would be kind of interesting to have a few more people in the community participate. So that's our plan for this year. Should we get the grant, that's what we're going to do. But again, primarily it was to bring a little bit more reflection and education into our event.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Any first timers who plan on hosting that want to share why they want to host this year? And you can either put it in the chat or you can unmute. No? Okay, we will move on. Thank you for those who did share. So there were a few changes from last year, and I'm just going to go over those really briefly. There is a change in the event poster, and you'll hear more about that as when I introduce our new director of communication, who created this one. You don't have to use this. We encourage the use of it just because it's easy for you to fill in your information, and it has the logo, it has the hashtag, so everything's sort of readily available. When you do use this, you can download this right on the resource pages of the website. Um, and so this is just the easy one, but you're more than welcome to use whatever flyer you'd like to use for that. And then also we increased the amount for food from 300 to 500 just to go along with the cost of inflation. And then also some of the feedback was that folks did not have enough to cover refreshments for their events. And as you can see, we also have a brand new logo. If you haven't been to the new website, we did a whole new rebranding. So we have a new Mass Humanities logo, but we also have one that's specific for reading Frederick Douglass together as well. So those logos can be used in your promo. And then we will have new t-shirts, which also is something that was offered. Some of you may have seen them last year. They were blue at some of the events. We gave them out to a couple of folks. This year, we want to give out more t-shirts to the event. So there is a checkbox in the application for you to request up to 10 t-shirts for your event. So the design on the t-shirts will be the same, but the color will be new as well. So those are some major changes that took place. Other than that, mostly everything else has pretty much stayed the same. And so a little bit more time for sharing, because we do have some wonderful folks who have hosted time and time again. So if you've hosted a past event, please share with us one or two things. A recommendation you have for a new grantee. So folks who have, and then the other one is a change that you will be making this year after reflecting on last year's event. So you can share one or the other. And again, you can do so, oopsies. You can do so by either raising your hand or posting in the chat. Yes, Suzanne? I think you have to remove the mute button.
Suzanne Moss from Grafton, Massachusetts. We have a collaborative of several nonprofits that put this on together, and I'm with the Unitarian Universalist Church there. And we've did it 2 years previously on the Grafton Common. And I would suggest that you closely pay attention to where the sun will be in July, if you're doing July 5th. And you know, we all watch for the weather, but we hadn't anticipated the sun. And one year it was directly in the face of the choral group that was also, we had engaged, you know, to be part of the whole celebration, and they couldn't see their conductor whatsoever. And it was just plain, it wasn't as bad on the speakers, but it just reflect, you know, for us, we changed the timing of the event to be a half hour to an hour later the following year, just so that the sun would have dropped further behind the trees that were nearby, you know, kind of thing. So not anything I ever would have thought of in advance, but that was one that we adjusted and will pay attention to again this year.
Thank you for sharing. And you are absolutely correct. As somebody who's been to several readings over the course of the summer, sometimes 2 in one day, I've definitely had to change multiple shirts from being out in the heat. So paying attention to the weather is important. It's actually one of the suggestions that I'll have on another slide. I see in the chat, Allison, who hosts in Somerville, said that they used the indoor space, and this year that they're going to print a big banner or a big poster to where speakers can stand to allow for better images and promotions of the event. That's great. I attended that event last year and was very thankful that it was inside, but also it was a very beautiful space in which it was hosted. So that was great. And then I think we have another one in the chat. Alindra, I want to make sure I pronounced that wrong. So the Hopkinton's Freedom Train, in conjunction with the Historical Society, is presenting their reading for the first time, and they're excited to bring the words Yeah, they're excited to bring the words for such a relevant and important Black American who walked, worked, and lived there. Yes, and so if I'm not mistaken, um one of your project scholar is actually one of our fellows who did some research, I believe so, right? Ann Matina, Dr. Ann is
Yes,
the fellow.
yes, she's on the call as well.
Yes, yes. So I already know that's going to be an exciting event because you have somebody who has some great firsthand knowledge of that. Anyone else have any recommendations or things that they're going to do differently for next year, Karen?
Two things. One is because we had other spoken content that was part of this as well as music. I did further shortening of the speech, and I did it in a slightly different way than the Mass Humanities did. I cut some phrases out of sentences, and it makes it a little bit easier, especially for some of our younger or less skilled. We had community readers to read. So if anybody wants that slightly shorter and a little crisper phrasing version, I'd be happy to share it with folks. And I had another thing, but that's enough.
Well, thank you for sharing. Yes. So you spoke about accessibility. You all are bringing up great topics that we're actually going to be getting into very shortly. Thank you so much for sharing that. I hope I didn't miss anyone else. So just to go over briefly, and Wes, you can let me know if you need me to share anything, or if I can give you sharing, I can stop sharing. So we have a new director of communications, and Wes has done an amazing job so far of capturing some of our Reading Frederick Douglass Together events and putting them together as promo videos on YouTube, but he also brings a wealth of knowledge. And so he's going to share a little bit with you about getting the best audience as well as publicity around your event.
Thanks very much, Toya. It's nice to meet everyone here. Please let me know if you can hear me okay. I'm actually on the road and I'm in a public library, so they told me I could use this side space, but I need to keep my voice down.
We can hear you.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. So yeah, as Toya mentioned, I'm the new communications manager for Mass Humanities, and I've already got a great introduction to Reading Frederick Douglass. Toya and I went to UMass Amherst in February, and I got to experience my first reading, and it was just as powerful as I was hoping it could be. It was just such a great experience. So what we have on our website is basically a set of materials that will help you promote your event. And there are resources there that you can take advantage of if you don't have the bandwidth to create something from scratch. So I am actually going to briefly share my screen. Okay. So I'm actually going to go back really quick. If you are on our website and you're on our grants page where you apply for the Reading Frederick Douglass grant. So if you go to the actual grants page, there is a link off of this down in these little accordions that have like all the extra information. Under the Learn How Communities Read, there's a link to our resources page. I'll also put that in the chat in a moment here. But you can go to the resources page for several different items. There's a quick checklist which helps you kind of plan logistics. We have links to different lengths of the speech. So there's a shorter abridged version, a medium version, and a full speech. And we also have the speech translated into both Spanish and Haitian Creole. So I just wanted to make sure that folks knew these were available here off our website. So it's a PDF, you can download it and print it. You could even create a QR code on like a little handout if you wanted to, and you could have people scan that if they wanted to, read along in Spanish, for example. Down here, though, is where I want to draw your attention, publicity for your reading. We have a couple of things here. This link at the bottom is just a link to an image of Douglas that you can put on an events calendar. That's something that many of your organizations have or your communities have. We also have a media kit. So if you click on this media kit, it will bring up a PDF. And this has some really helpful boiled down guidelines. But the gist of it is to, enlist the help of your partners and colleagues and neighbors, because you don't really necessarily always know who might, feel very strongly about being part of a shared reading. There are some guidelines on who you can reach out to. So you can reach out to, local publications in your community. If there's like a local radio station or radio program, the recommendation is to get in touch about a month ahead of time so that the news service or the organization has enough time to, follow up, add the event to their calendar perhaps, or to ask you questions about the event. We also have some sample social media posts, which can be very helpful just to copy and paste. And you just put your information into the highlighted section. So, you would add your name, your organization's name, I should say. You can explain a little bit about the program here, and you can also include a link to the Mass Humanities website. We do get a lot of funding from the Massachusetts Cultural Council, so we always encourage folks to tag them as well as Mass Humanities in their posts. And there's also an optional, you can also always tag your local state rep or state senator, because they're often very interested in what's happening, at the grassroots level in their areas. So these links up here would take you to a very easy list that you can find your local rep. And I would encourage everyone to take advantage of that. Lastly, we have a sample press release. And I know this is something that, many small organizations might not always have bandwidth for. So we've tried to kind of do some of the heavy lifting. It's a sample press release. Again, you would kind of copy and paste this text. You would replace the highlighted portions with the name of your organization. There's some areas that you can add in the amount of your grant. You would put your city and the date. And then what you basically do is you put this into an email, like in Microsoft Outlook or Gmail, and you send this off to the contact email for, the local news in your area. And what they hopefully will do is they'll write the information down. They might reach out to you with questions, or they might send someone from the paper to cover the event. And it's a really great way to get, in touch with like a local journalist. And there's some other guidelines here. So you can add in, some people said there was, certain modifications they had made to the event that differed from the Mass Humanities website. Well, you can list that information here along with a short quote from someone in your organization, probably a leader like the executive director. So that is our media kit. The last thing I will show everybody is a link to our event poster. As Toya was saying, this is completely optional, but if you would like to download a standard paper-sized flyer, you can click on this button. And you have a nice high-resolution print PDF here that you can use to publicize your event. The one thing I will note that's interesting about this image of Douglas is I found it in the National Archives, and this is actually clothing and attire that he himself chose for this portrait session. And there's a lot of really interesting information there about the fact that he wanted to be represented and portrayed in this way. So we thought it was a nice, update to the event poster this year. So I will, oops. Toya, did I miss anything?
No, unless anyone has any questions. And if you do, you can place it in the chat or raise your hand. This is just
Hi,
the
this is
publicity portion.
Tia. Castellano from Bristol Black Collective in Fall River. Wes, I had a question. Last year when I was adding our information to the flyer, it was a little difficult because it was just inserting your name, the date, the information of the organizations, but we also wanted to add the logos so that people could be familiarized with the logo and attaching it to this particular event. Is there a way that you could help us with something like that so that it's easier? Because I had to go through a whole bunch of steps to do so last year.
Sorry about that. Yes, I would be happy to help with that. Right, there is just a field right here that you can click, but adding multiple logos might pose a challenge. I put my email address into the chat, and I would encourage you to reach out to me, and I would love to help out.
Okay, I got it.
You know, one other thing, I'm actually glad that you brought the logos up, Tia. I forgot to show everyone on our publicity guidelines page on our website. Ooh, that's not good. I need to update that one. We have our new Mass Humanities logos available on our website. So you can see on this page here on the left-hand side, we have kind of our new word mark. I'm going to add the Reading Frederick Douglass logos here though, because that's an important, it's a really great logo, and it can lend something to the flyers and other materials. So I'm going to add that later today, so you can also have access to that new logo that was in Toya's slide deck.
Wes, there's a question in the chat from Trish with the Bourne Historical Society.
Okay.
She says we're first-time grant applicants. If our organization, the Bourne Historical Society, is not selected as a grantee, okay, Toya's answered this already, but I do just want to finish reading it out. Would we still be permitted to use the publicity kit for your event?
Yes, the answer is absolutely. That is fully within the spirit of the Douglass shared reading tradition. So please go ahead.
And as far as not receiving the application, not receiving the grant, pretty much I'm going to do the best I can to make sure that you do receive the grant. So if there's any issues with the application process, then you usually will get an email from me, and then we'll kind of figure out a way back and forth on whatever needs to take place so that you are able to receive that grant. So I'm pretty much almost positive that you will, as long as we get that application process going. And yes, as Wes said, the next application deadline is April 5th, if you haven't already applied. Yes, Suzanne has a question as well.
Let me unmute. There we go. I would like to use all of the new logo. I know I have already been on your website and I've seen it. I just went and checked. We very carefully saved our 6-foot banners that we proudly put on the Grafton Common. So all traffic, everybody who comes through Grafton traffic-wise has to pass it, see it. And of course, it has the previous image and the old logo on it. And so that's an additional printing cost. So that was the trade-off. But you're saying we don't have to use it, but I would want to support you. But is there should we be using it, I guess, in order to promote Mass Humanities and your new brand and reprinting everything?
I would strongly encourage it, simply because this is also our 50th year anniversary.
Okay.
So a lot of the program that we'll be doing is going to be in celebrating the work that we've done over the past 50 years throughout the Commonwealth. So I would strongly encourage that. And again, I can work with you around that as far as the budget.
Okay. We did such a good job of saving them, which is unusual in a church that they survived. I'm sorry. And we knew where they were. Okay.
And also maybe there's a way where we can like figure out a way to get the logo on it, or like we can figure something out. In worst case scenario, we can figure it out.
Thank you. All right.
Yes, Suzanne, please feel free to email me as well, because there are ways to repurpose an existing banner. I'm not
Oh,
saying
okay.
there's a guaranteed way, but there are ways I've seen done.
All right. Thank
So
you.
please reach
Yeah,
out.
I didn't want to glue something on, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Martin has a question as well.
I do. I just actually more logistical operational question on the grant. I know you have your calendar for awards and whatnot, and it says you want to be able to use it 2 to 3 weeks after the award announcement date. When we're using this for our event, like it's a fairly large event, and we plan well ahead of time for this. And if we wait until 2 to 3 weeks, that's like the end of May. In that grant period, and it always makes me nervous when I plan a big event and have to pay for things to not know that I'm going to get it until 2 weeks before my event. Are we okay to apply earlier in the process and not use it until? Okay, I just want to make sure, because
Absolutely,
you have a
yes.
very specific calendar here, and
Yes,
last year,
yes.
like I was like crossing fingers that we got it. So
Yes, I encourage you to apply earlier, because then that way, like you said, you have more than enough time to do the promo, to make sure that you receive your
perfect.
payment. So the sooner the better. We have events that have already been planned in June and July that
Great.
had been received. They applied already for the first couple of cycles. So right now we currently have 18 open approvals thus far for
Perfect.
applications. Some of the readings have already taken place during Black History Month, but 18 thus far. So the earlier you get it in, the better, because then that way we can get all the paperwork done, get the
Okay.
funds sent out to you. So great question.
Excellent. That is that's what I want, because last year I was pins and needles, and this year I was hoping I could apply a little earlier. So,
yeah.
awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions as far as outreach and publicity before we move on to some more logistics?
Maybe I'll just say, please do tag us on social media, because we will reshare your event, and we love to do that. So I'm really making that a priority this year. So please do tag us when your event is happening, even if it's just a photo of things getting started. Whatever you can get is a win. And if you tag us, I'll be sure to make sure we share that to the Mass Humanities Network.
And the same for flyers or other event pages. So if you have a Facebook, if you create any sort of Facebook event page, or there's a page on your website that's dedicated to the reading, once you have anything that's set up that can go out to folks, definitely forward it to Wes, because he will share those links out with folks, or the flyer or whatever it is out to folks through all of our social media pages.
And I just wanted to mention, I don't think that I saw it brought up, Wes, while you were doing the stuff for the publicity, was the events calendar for Mass Humanities, to make sure that we put it up there, and how to do it.
That is one of the biggest changes of our new website. We used to have a website that anyone could just post to, and we've kind of changed the process. So what I would say is reach out to me or Toya, and then I can add it to the calendar, so that it's a bit more of a the process is just a little bit different. But if you share your event details with me or Toya, we'll make sure that we can add it to the calendar.
Yes, and then also we usually have, when we have a list of grantees. So once you've gotten the grant, the list of grantees there's a page for that too, for all the folks who've received the Reading Frederick Douglass Together grant. So on that, we can also link it to your event page that way too. So it's important just to be detailed about dates, times, or if anything changes on the application. So on the application, if you say you're starting at 4, but then it changes to 6, like these are things you really want to update us about too, because if we're able to come, we try to send board members, we try to attend as staff, or send Wes if he's available, or if we have connections to other outlets, we want to send folks, and we just want to make sure that the information's accurate. So anytime there's a change to the date, location, or time of the event, you definitely want to update myself with that, and I can update Wes. Any other questions around outreach and publicity? Well, thank you so much, Wes, for sharing that. And as always, if you do have questions, he's amazing. Like really, he's really an amazing addition to Mass Humanity. So definitely be sure to reach out, and he can support you around getting the word out for your event. I'm going to go back to our lovely PowerPoint and start talking a little bit about logistics. Okay, so these are just things to think about and sort of recipes for success. One of the things that you want to think about is your type of event. Some of you are really great at this, have done this again repeatedly, but if this is your first time, if you're considering changing the format, we know that sometimes that readings take place as a part of Juneteenth celebrations and festivals or a part of bigger events. So that's something to think about in kind of having a specific time and thinking about any distractions that could occur because it's happening at a festival. Sometimes people will extend the event and make it a part of something that has to do with a book club or walking or meditation. So you can also just do a single event, but you can also make it a part of other programming to make it more widespread or to make it last longer. You can have multi-day events. So splitting it up into more than one thing is always welcomed as well. So we encourage innovation, and each year there's always someone who surprises us with a different way of hosting the event. Sometimes it's in those smaller spaces. We have folks who record it at the beach almost every year and then post it to YouTube. So there's so many different ways in which the reading could be done. Important to think about is sound and sound checks. So being sure that you do have a working sound system. I know sometimes folks will feel like it's okay to just speak without a microphone or without a sound system, but when we really want to think about accessibility and also, again, distractions. If you're outside and it's a space where there's a lot of flow and traffic, if you're near an airport or anything like that. So we want to be conscious of sound and making sure that the sound equipment works by doing a sound check in advance, because sometimes that can be a distraction and it can prevent us from hearing the words during the reading. So we want to pay attention to that. As stated earlier, really planning for the weather, planning for the sun as well as the rain. You know, this is New England, so we don't know what to expect in the summertime. So just being very careful about if it's raining, having either a rain date in advance, or if you don't have a rain date, having an inside space available for that. Thinking about things such as possibly working with organizations to get tents or other spaces to block or shade that area if it's going to be extremely hot, making sure you have water accessible for folks in case they're thirsty or they're feeling, make sure we have first aid or people who are paying attention to signs of distress because it can be really hot. I know 2 years ago it was extremely hot. So just making sure that we're taking account for the weather. And then thinking about the flow of the reading. I've been to several readings, so I see a different flow. Sometimes it's pre-planned and people will have assigned parts. Sometimes I went to one reading and the seats were numbered and those numbers aligned with the different parts of the speech. I've seen where there's one microphone. I've seen where there's two microphones, which really is a successful way in terms of keeping the flow going, because as one person goes up on one side, the other person's able to go up and then it keeps the flow going. So that's a really great best practice if you're able to do that. But really think about that flow of the reading. We've had some readings where people have spoken it in different languages and using their native language to speak. So that's also another way you could do it. But definitely you want to be as creative as possible and really think about accessibility of the space, accessibility in terms of hearing. If there's other supports that you can supply, that's great. The QR codes are great. If you're even able to have somebody sign, that's great. Whatever you can to supply to increase accessibility is always a great thing when we're thinking about the day of events. Someone says we were able to have a portable mic, so we were passed to reader to reader. So that's helpful too, right? So having some folks had portable mics, some folks had plugged in mics with and then they had a place for people to actually put that. I would also recommend, if you plan on doing the reading again, one way to save on cost too is to kind of keep a copy of those, like collect those readings afterwards if they're not written on. Some folks do write on them and again highlight them or assign parts. Sometimes we have people who again will act the part of Frederick Douglass or read most of the parts. One of the recent readings, instead of having people read one part, they read two parts. So there's so many different ways you can do it. Don't be afraid to try new things. And I'm available if you want to brainstorm ideas around how to do it differently or how to try something new. And then I'm going to talk really quickly about the discussion guide, which we introduced last year, but I really want to go over it again because I think it's very important when we start thinking about the events. So I'm going to share that as well. So when I talked about when I created the trauma-informed guide, we really looked at some principles around that we got from the CDC. And so the first one is safety. So when thinking about, these are important things to think about. I'm going to try to see if I can make this a little bigger. Yes. So again, we talked about accessibility, having a variety of sitting and seating spaces. I know in some spaces, everybody's able to stand, but we do want to be cognizant of the fact that the reading is going to be at least 30 minutes. And so there may not be people who are able to stand for that long amount of time. So thinking about having seating. So if you can't have seating for everyone, maybe having certain seating available. Having, if it's inside, having clearly posted emergency exits and restrooms. If you're outside or anywhere, having a first aid kit. Never know, it's summertime. Again, people get hot. Sometimes people could fall if they are standing for too long. So these are things that we want to think about. We want to think about physical, emotional, and psychological safety. One great thing is to create community norms prior to, if we're going to host a discussion, and even throughout, having those norms that we want people to abide by. And then again, having folks to really look out for signs of distress or discomfort. Is somebody getting agitated? Because we're thinking about safety in some spaces, but also is somebody looking like, they're getting overheated? So paying attention to those things, having somebody, especially if you have a really large reading or you're in a really large open space, providing warnings and exit strategies prior to, and letting people know that this could be potentially re-traumatizing. Some of us have been doing this reading over and over again, and so maybe we don't have those same feelings, but that's the thing about trauma, is that it looks different for different folks. And so we really want to pay attention to that and let people know that there's space, right? Especially if you're inside. Hey, if this becomes too emotional during this time, or you need to take space, or you need an emotional break, you can go here, you can go to this space. So allowing people that freedom of being able to exit if ever they need to. The trustworthiness and transparency. So it's good if you are going to be taking pictures, it's a good idea to have a informed consent sign, or just letting folks know, or something posted that, by being here, that you consent to being photographed or visually or audibly recorded. Providing an agenda is always good too, if you're going to have more than one type of event during the reading, or if you're going to break the reading up into two different parts. Enforcing those group norms as reminders is also important. So we can't just create the norms, we also want to enforce them if they're not being adhered to. Using people's names when addressing them, and then checking in, especially during that discussion process, just to make sure that folks are ready to talk about it, that if there's a break that's needed overall, if you notice that things may be getting heated. Every event looks different, and so that's why this guide was created. Peer support. So encouraging participants to provide a warning before sharing a personal experience. So I've seen this happen in discussion groups or settings where people are sharing something that happened to them. But we have to think about that this could be potentially triggering for other people. So you want to encourage participants that if you're sharing a personal experience, that you kind of can give a disclaimer that I am going to talk about this. And so then that way, that gives people time to exit or to prepare themselves as best as they can, even though there's not really much you can do in terms of preparation if you are triggered by that. Encourage agreed upon sign of validation for sharing thoughts. So this could be finger snaps, this could be claps, this could be thank you for sharing, but sort of having a universal sign to encourage folks to participate. And then really paying attention to and interrupting social power dynamics as we're looking at that. What are the voices that aren't being heard? Who are the people that are speaking often or cutting people off? We want to pay attention to those social dynamics, and then we also want to interrupt them. And then including participants in those norms. So you can create them and ask if they agree to them, or you can create norms. And then structuring the conversations in different ways. So if you're having a conversation, it could be one-on-one, it could be small groups, it could be large group, guided or unguided. So there's so many different ways in which you can do it. I recommend trying out, different things with each reading, and then reflecting. If it doesn't work, we do something different next time. And then always reminding people that they have a choice to participate in any or all portions of the activity. encouraging people to use their skills to support that. Like if there's a note taker, if there's a group leader, is there a timekeeper? You may have staff that do that, but also there may be other people who might be interested in supporting that as well. And then also always thinking about the cultural, historical, and gender issues with this, acknowledging that oppression does exist, right? And that it exists based on race, ethnicity, class, gender, sexual orientation, country of origin, religion, mental health status, age, and ability. So all of these are systemic in American society. So we do have to acknowledge those, offering land acknowledgements as well. And again, acknowledging those power imbalances. So some of you will be hosting a reading and just a reading. As I said before, some of you will also be hosting readings as a part of a larger event or a series of events. But you really do want to, whether you have a discussion or not, you really do want to encourage a coming together prior to starting the reading. In Boston, we usually do some singing and some song and drumming at the Boston one, but there's always something where we're kind of bringing ourselves together and settling our bodies. A settled body is a body that's ready to respond and react to stress. And so the stress can be a good stress because some of us love this speech and we get excited about it. But again, for some people, this can hold a space for trauma. And so we want to think about this. A settled body enables you to harmonize and connect with other bodies around you. But you bring a large group of settled bodies together and you have the potential and a force for tremendous good in the world. Right. So we want to make sure that we find some way to bring us together. There should be something. I know sometimes people start off with something like the Black National Anthem, sing-alongs. So there's a bunch of suggestions. I'm not going to go through the entire thing, but there is definitely a bunch of suggestions in the trauma-informed kit for ways in which you can bring people together as they start to prepare for the reading. You want to begin and end your reading with something like that. And then there's a list of considerations and ways in which you can structure things. And then there are discussion questions and suggestions. So these discussion prompts can be used. We did have an old one that we had. I found it to be, you know, not something that just regular folks can sit around and talk about. It read to me more like something that we talked about in college classrooms, and that's all good, but we really want this to be a community discussion. So there are discussion prompts, there are follow-up prompts. You can feel free to reword them. You can use some of them, you can use all of them. You really want to pay attention to your audience demographics. Are we talking about children? Is it a mixed audience? Where are we? What topics do we really want to specifically bring up in our communities based on those demographics or the issues that exist within our communities? So there's a bunch of questions on there. And again, it tells us also how we can close out our event in a harmonious way as well. So this is available on the resources website. We strongly encourage use of it, especially if this is your first reading. Even if it's not, we strongly encourage you using bits and pieces of it. So you can follow it 100%, you can follow it 10%, but we definitely want to make sure that we create a space that is welcoming for people. And we definitely want to resist re-traumatization for people who are participating in the readings. And I'm going to stop there for a moment to take questions. So if we have no more questions, we can, this is one of our readings from last year as well. So any questions? If you can, for a moment, if you are able to either use the emoji button or you can just raise your hand if you are having a discussion as a part of your reading this year. Okay, so we have some folks who are and some folks who are not. So again, you can definitely use the discussion guide, but even if you're not doing the discussion piece, you really want to incorporate some of the practices in there in terms of bringing people together before closing it out with the ceremony, and really thinking about creating not just a physically safe space, but an emotionally and physiologically and psychologically safe space for that discussion. All right, we have about 10 minutes left. Do we have any questions or comments or anything that you'd like to share out?
So I just wanted to share that last year in lieu of a discussion, we had put sticky notes on each of the tables, and we asked people to, answer. We did have questions throughout the reading. After each person read, there were questions presented to the audience, and we asked them to, anonymously put it on the sticky note, leave it on the table, and then we'll go around and collect them. And then, so we can know what the audience is thinking as we're looking to do it again this year. So that seemed to work well for us. Although, as I was looking at the screen while you had the questions up, I was thinking of maybe having some pre-printed cards with the questions on them, because we really didn't know what they were responding to, although we were getting feedback from the audience. But we, this year, I think to tighten it up, having some cards pre-printed with the questions on it so that they can actually respond to the questions and we can get more feedback that way. We're doing it different this year. So hopefully we will get a lot more feedback and be able to figure out how we'll move forward with doing a discussion about the responses that we get even after the event.
Oh, that sounds great. And I like the idea that you use Post-its because it kind of offered people, like you said, that for some people, they don't like to talk out loud or they're afraid of what people might say about their thoughts. So having that, being able to kind of write it down on a Post-it and share it is also a great idea. So I hope this works out with you trying some different questions out and giving people, you're right, having people that time to advance. Sometimes it's hard. So when we talk about accessibility, we have to think about all those types of learners, right? That might show up at our reading. Some people love to talk and have discourse. Some people need to write it down. Some people need time to reflect, an extended time. Some people need to know those questions in advance so they know what to think about while they're doing the reading. So those are some great suggestions. And I see Martin has his hand raised.
Yeah, we used that discussion guide, which was excellently put together, by the way, last year in a couple of different ways. The first way that we did it is everyone within our organization and the speaker, we gave that to them ahead of time so that one, they could be thinking just about this in general in case a question came up. And it actually specifically worked because when we were done doing the reading and people went out into the crowd, like individuals weren't raising their hands, but they were having those discussions within the day. And so it was super helpful to give it out ahead of time. And then we actually posted it after the event because some parents came up like, oh, I really have this question. I want to talk to my kid about this and kind of use that as a resource for them to have further discussions as they went on. So it was super handy. I highly recommend just making sure it's accessible, at least even the guide itself is accessible to everyone, but to your speakers specifically in case they want to prepare in case people ask them questions off the cuff.
Thank you for sharing. That's actually great that you were able to share it with parents or with other people because sometimes people don't know. And that was the reason, part of the rationale for creating these tools, right? Like we want to talk about it, but we're not quite sure how to talk about it. And then we also know that people have different levels of comfort in terms of starting these conversations or facilitating those conversations. So that was really helpful. Any other questions or comments? Ideas or best practices? Okay, with that being said, again, I'll still take questions. In the beginning, we did a critical check-in. I'd like to do a critical checkout. So again, on a scale of 1 to 5, so 5 being very much so, 1 being not very much, please let us know how much more prepared you are. If not, that's fine too, that you are to host your reading. So 5 is that you feel much more prepared after this workshop, 1 being not so much. I see some 5s, some 4s. Great. So again, as always, I'm available. I'll put my email in. Most of you have it because either I'm emailing you your award packets or I'm following up with you if there is an issue with your application. But again, I'm also available for if you need support with or ideas or brainstorming around programming or have questions about the guide or anything with the application process, just feel free to reach out to me. If you have any questions around publicity, you can reach out to me too, but Wes is the go-to person for that. Any other questions? Also want to thank my colleague Marie for who's been taking the questions for us today and keeping track of what's happening over here in the chat. This is also going to be available. It'll be posted on YouTube. So in case you missed it or someone else missed it, you'll be able to go back and watch it. And if you have any other questions. And I'll just pause for one more question before we get ready to close out. Post it before the end of the week, Wes said. All right, so I'd like to just close out real quickly. And you don't have to share, but I would encourage you to. So as we close out, share like one thing that you're most excited about with hosting the reading this year.
I'll start. I'm really excited to just bring it to the community for the first time.
Yes, I am too. I love a first time reading.
What she said, I'm gonna jump on the same thing. I'm excited to bring it to the community and bring the community together, engage in this downtown Worcester.
Excellent. Are you guys bringing back your young man poet again this year?
Oh yeah, we're gonna have a couple poets. We're gonna have actually 2 women and a man and a young man so far. Young woman that's actually the Worcester Poet Laureate for the city of Worcester for 2024. She's gonna do a poet, yes.
Wonderful.
Last year, we did it together with installing these memorial stones for the 6 people who were enslaved at this historic house. And because it was raining, we had the event in the corn barn and the stones are out in the garden. And I'm really, really hoping we have weather that lets us have the event surrounded by these memorial stones. And I guess the other thing I'll say is in doing the research for that, we discovered a bunch of American Revolution ironies connections that were really powerful to me. And so it feels really moving to be doing this together with the 4th of July rather than in September.
Wonderful. I'm excited about that. And I hope that the weather permits as well. I see Suzanne in the chat says a better discussion guide, better discussion using the discussion guide and also the Haitian translation. Great.
There's a couple more in the chat. Toya, we've got Allison's excited about being inside and not having to deal with the unpredictable weather. Trisha's excited about representing news stories in the community. And Martin says he's excited to get more people from the community to participate in the reading.
Wonderful. So one thing that I know when it came to the discussion guide, some folks like to encourage discussion did like raffles where they raffled off the shirts for participation to kind of get people, and so it's just like, oh, you get a raffle ticket if you participate in the question or in the readings. So sometimes that might be helpful, a helpful way to use the t-shirts as well, is to say, you could get a t-shirt, you could raffle off a few t-shirts for folks who decide to read or read for the first time. Because I know some of you who've hosted probably have folks who come every year and it's the same people and they probably have their same verse that they love and like, which I love too. I love to see that because there are people who are like, no, I need to read like 22. That's my favorite line. And so there's a lot of that happens. And then again, we have people who are reading for the very first time. And so it's exciting, and I'm going to try to do my best to make as many readings as possible. When I'm not there, then hopefully someone on our team will be making it or someone on our board. Usually I will reach out to you to let you know if someone from our organization is going to be attending, just so that you can sort of look out for us. And more than likely we'll be wearing our Reading Frederick Douglass Together t-shirt, so you will know us anyway, but I'll definitely reach out to you. Any last questions before we wrap up? Because we want to honor our time. Says it. Yes, Marie says she's exciting to see readings as so Marie is new to our team, so she has not yet witnessed the Reading Frederick Douglass Together reading and all the lovely energy that comes along with that. So excited for her to attend one too. Well, thank you very much for taking your lunch break with us. If it was your lunch break, thank you so much. Again, this will be made available on YouTube, and we are here if you have any questions. Looking forward to the wonderful work that you'll do this season.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a lovely, lovely afternoon.